are the best.
Yes. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's part of our judges kit for this year's Emerald Cup. And so we got a whole kit of all types of shenanigans. I mean, their cutters, their papers. I got like a special tray. I guess it's a tray that they only make so many times a year or for specific judges, maybe for if they're a sponsor. So I'm
Cool.
enjoying it. This little thing trips me out on the side. It's like a stick, like a poker so that you could,
Oh,
use
cool.
your flour, for the cone. We're
No,
here.
that's so cool. Josh thinks of everything. Like that's true stoner, like what's the word? Ingenuity. Yeah.
Yes.
Ingenuity of like, like I saw his umbrella that you can smoke out of and like just the lighters that block the wind. Like it's just amazing when a stoner's actually part of the brand, what cool products can come out of it.
Yeah, they're all products you can use, I would say.
Right.
It's the worst that you get like a goodie bag and you're like, "Oh, I don't use any of these things." But yes, I am excited to have you on here. Thank you so much for giving us time and, allowing us to pick your brain and sharing you with our audience here. So I always like to start with allowing you guys to get to know who you are. So if you don't mind just telling us who you are and maybe a little bit of what you've built, and then we can dive into it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me on. So my name is Dr. Riley Kirk, technically, but just call me Riley. I'm a cannabis research scientist and educator. So I create content online about new things in the science world for cannabis, so we can all stay up to date, as well as disseminating research. But I also am the co-founder of a cannabis research nonprofit called the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy, or just NAP. And essentially, what we're trying to do is combine the real world lived experience of cannabis consumers and the medicinal value that our community knows, and pair that with the biochemical data in the laboratory to get a better idea of how this medicine works in the body, but kind of from more of a nuanced and broad perspective to include the community aspect and the spirituality aspect, as well as the, very niche biochemical things happening.
Wow. I know I went onto your website and I was like, let me check it out. I follow you on Instagram. I think you're also on LinkedIn. I kind of see you everywhere because, as you know, if we're in the community and we are truly about supporting one another, especially if we are content creators, I know Megan out there that's a nurse as well. I seen you on that platform. Just cross collaborating with people is the best. But I think that's also a way to kind of, you know, trick the algorithms, especially for things that we talk about, because we have a lot of censorship, unfortunately, still around everything that we're talking about, even though it is natural medicine, like you said. So when I saw that on your website, made more sense as far as like the NAP, as far as the acronyms of your business, and everything is going to be in our description. So make sure you guys check her out. She's on Instagram. Amazing content. I have to say that's the first thing that caught my eye on Instagram. And it wasn't necessarily, I think it was cannabis talk, but you were also kind of letting us know as content creators, like how to work around things. And so it's so interesting to see your content because you cover things all the way at a scientific level, all the way to like a fun content creator level. And so I feel like you have an audience for so many people. And it's important that you do that because, again, it comes down to education. I think it talks to so many different demographics and audience.
Yeah, and it comes down to education, and it comes down to trust as well within the community, right? So I do produce a large variety of content, and it's everything from me like ripping a bong or a vape or taking a dab and talking about that, to the actual like chemistry and what's happening. And to me, I think it's really important to show that full spectrum, especially within the community, because from a research perspective, we haven't really had that trust between the community and researchers, right? It's always like the government, asking us, hey, do you mind taking the survey about your cannabis use? And it's like, yeah, I do mind doing that, actually. I do mind doing that. You've prosecuted our community for a long time. So I think it's really important for cannabis research to come from within the community to make sure that we're shaping that story in the right way, that research in the right way, to really represent our community and not take advantage of people and not take advantage of data.
Yeah, that's so funny. I don't come with any scientific background or any medical background, but I am very into fitness. And just because I'm also, reading what they're saying as far as trials, even for, trying to figure out obesity, there's different type of trials. And she even breaks down, like, it is really up to the people who are creating the research to make the markers. And so that totally makes sense as to why some of these research don't make sense and apply to some of us in this space, or most of us in this space. So I'm so glad that you're doing the work out there. I think it is important. I'm always the first to be like, there's no way I fit into that stoner couch lock. I've done mixed martial arts. I've done NPC bodybuilding, corporate background of 2 decades from retail to like private banking. I've never fit that. It's always, just motivated me in different ways. I see it kind of like a supplement, and you may have a different, idea to that, or, you're a scientist. So I'm curious to kind of see, just kind of pick your brain on what made you start doing this. Were you always into weed when you grew up? Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of like how you got into weed, the fun
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, my intro to weed is my older brother was definitely like the stoner, like the absolute notorious stoner in our, high school. Me and both my brothers all started using cannabis at a relatively young age. Like I was 14 when I first started using cannabis. And, from the first day I tried it, something just like clicked in my brain with it. It just felt really normal. It felt right. But I think it's genetic too, because it's really throughout my whole family. And I wouldn't say my parents were like encouraging us to, go smoke as much weed as possible, but they were very accepting of it because they saw it as harm reduction. Like if we were at home using cannabis, they were cooler with that than, us going out and partying and drinking. So my parents were pretty cool in that realm. And just from there and having that kind of safety net at home, I just kept using cannabis. And even throughout college, I kind of started to be known as the stoner girl because I would always have weed on me one way or another, just as a staple. And then actually after college, I actually worked in biotech, but then I went to grad school to study medicinal plants because I've always been really interested in nature as medicine. And I loved weed my whole life, but I never thought of it as like a career. I was just like, oh, I'm going to do something and then like also love weed and smoke weed every day. I never thought I'd actually study and be in the weed industry. But it wasn't until grad school where there was I was the TA for a course that was teaching cannabis certification, essentially. Like, here's your, certificate in cannabis studies and cannabis chemistry and pharmacology. I was chosen as the TA because I was just a very open stoner and weed lover. And I knew a lot about cannabis just on my own from reading and studying it. Mm-hmm. But then when I was teaching about it and I was making these educational videos for the students, it really like irked me that students had to pay $5,000, $7,000 to learn about how cannabis works in the body. And I was like, why doesn't every stoner know this? Like, this is such important information. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, what's a girl to do but make some TikToks at home? So I started making TikToks just talking about, the chemistry and pharmacology of cannabis and how it works in the body and, all that cool stuff. And then my channel just blew up, and I've literally just been making content since. I got my first job in the industry from my TikTok and my ability to communicate science. And I've just kind of been within the industry ever since. And now I'm really in the entrepreneurial role, which is amazing. That's been a really cool leap in the past year. But yeah, it's been a ride.
Oh, I love that. I had no idea. It's like, some people who come with like a science background, you don't know if they really like got into weed in college, or was it like always part of their life, or are they just getting on the bandwagon now because of the cannabis industry? So I love that it's been part of your life. It's always nice for elders to be like, thanks, bro. You really like helped me find my true passion, what it's made for. That's exciting because it was the same for me. It's always been part of my life since high school. And now it's like full circle as to what I'm doing now. And entrepreneur life is not easy. It, isn't always paying the bills as a regular, what I built my career on was obviously a lot different, but I'm having so much fun doing this. The podcasting is the newest thing I've done. I know you have your own podcast. It is the Bioactive Podcast. I love the name. When did you start doing that? Because I know you said you did the TikTok video. So COVID was what, 2020?
Yeah. That's when I
2020.
started I think I started TikTok in 2020 or 2021,
Okay.
sometime during the pandemic. I don't know. Yeah, maybe late 2020. But yeah, sorry, what was the question?
No, when did you start doing your podcast? At the same time that you started doing your TikTok, or did you kind
So
of build
that's a
a
good question,
community?
'cause this is actually my second podcast, which I don't think everybody knows, but the first podcast was actually part of a company I was part of early on in my in the cannabis industry for me. So that one was called Smoke and Science, and that one was really cool.
Nice.
But it was kind of owned by the company. So when I left and the other person left, the podcast kind of died with that. But I highly recommend it still. It's still out there.
Nice. That
But
sounds
my
good.
new podcast, Bioactive, I started that in July of last year. And, it's just fun to have these long form conversations, especially when we're talking about medicine and pharmacology and chemistry and people's personal stories. I think with cannabis, you really need that nuance when you're storytelling about it for people to really grasp the depth that we're talking about our relationship with this medicine. So I really enjoy the long form conversations, but short form content's fun too.
You do both, I imagine, because you have some shorts on Instagram, and then we could probably find your longer forms of those videos on YouTube, right? You're also on YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube.
Nice. Yeah, I love YouTube. Shout out to YouTube. Instagram's great as well. I love for the shorts, just to get people to be interested in like the important parts of the long conversations because they can get like an hour to 2 hours depending on what we're talking about. It is a very hot topic. It's so much to dive into. What's your background as far as fitness? I'm a very big fitness enthusiast. Like I said, I did bodybuilding until now. I still am very like big about being an advocate to make sure people get out there and get some sort of movement. Not so much like I am totally all about the wellness part of it, but specifically like building muscle mass and not being afraid of like weights and the gym as women. You being a scientist, I imagine you have some sort of something to say to that, especially the fact that a lot of us who are in fitness or who are athletes, especially now talking about cannabis being part of their regimen. Any research or anything that you've like dived into when it comes to that realm?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool research, and I think some of the coolest research is about running specifically, which isn't necessarily about weightlifting, but you can find synergies between them. And essentially, that runner's high that we get after we run, we always attributed that to potentially our naturally occurring opiates in our body, but it's actually your naturally occurring cannabinoid molecules, your endocannabinoids, why you get that runner's high after you exercise. That's your own body's way of like elevating your mood. And it's really cool because if there is research that if you do use cannabis products before the gym, it helps with motivation, it helps with performance for some people. But what it really helps with is actually just getting people moving and getting people to the gym, which is very counterintuitive to what the stigma says. So that I think that research is really interesting because you mentioned this in the beginning. Like, I don't get the couch lock effect from using cannabis. I don't, you don't. A lot of people don't. A lot of us find it really stimulating and motivating. So research out of Colorado University found that people who used cannabis before the gym were more likely to spend longer there and enjoy their exercise more than people who weren't using cannabis. So I really think that research is cool as far as stigma, but as far as like getting people moving. We have a epidemic in the United States of people, sitting a lot during work, and, sitting's the new smoking.
Yeah.
Whether you're just walking around your yard or you're lifting weights or you're running, 5Ks, if you could just get moving at all, it's so good for every component of your life, for your metabolism, for your
Yes.
immune system. I mean, just literally everything in your general health. And me personally, I don't really go to the gym and exercise because I don't live near a gym. I live like in the middle of the mountains. But I do live a very active lifestyle, just constantly just moving heavy things and
Right.
working for like hours outside. And we also like hunt and trap and forage for our own food. So that's quite an active lifestyle too.
Oh my gosh, tell us about that. That's really like to me, it's exciting to hear. I only hear like Joe Rogan talk about his hunting experiences. And lately I've been hearing some girls doing some boat trips. So it just depends, I think, where you kind of grew up from. Is that always something that you've been into?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a forager. I know my plants and fungi quite well, especially in my local area. But I never really got into hunting or trapping until I met my husband, and he is a wildlife
Trapping
biologist.
is
Oh, sorry,
like,
trapping.
yeah, what's
Regulated
trapping?
trapping. Yeah, there's different kinds of trapping. We mainly trap beavers for food and for fur.
Oh,
We're also, yeah, so we're also furriers. So we sew fur products. This is like a whole nother side of my life. But yeah, so we like to harvest and be self-sustaining for at least 60% of what we consume for food. So all of the red meat that we eat is harvested by us by either hunting or trapping, and then a lot of the vegetables were either growing or foraging. But yeah, I wasn't that into it until I got married and I moved up where I currently live in the mountains, and it really just, the relationship you build with nature and your respect for every morsel of food that you put into your mouth and the ecosystem that it was a part of. It's a really beautiful feeling. And personally, I've struggled with eating disorders in the past, and having that relationship with my food and being able to grow my own medicine and just being part, like, intimately of everything that I put in my body has been like a huge part of the healing experience.
wow, that's amazing. I think it's amazing that if you're able to, like you said, be able to like provide for yourself from food to, everything that you need to survive is amazing. I watch those is it Alone on
Yeah.
Netflix where they're like left out there, and they talk about that, making sure when they get an animal or it's sacrificed to them that they give, their prayers back or say thank you for what they've been given. But that totally makes sense as to why you're always glowing. Are you, there's a big like diet fad with red meat. Like, don't eat red meat. It's so bad with you. Go with the plant-based. And me being into fitness, I'm reading this book right now by Dr. Gabrielle Leon, and she's huge on building skeletal muscle to help people. Like, I guess, obesity is huge right now, or not just right now, just in general for
Yeah.
especially our society. And then just the lack of knowledge that most doctors have when it comes to overall like wellness as far as skeletal muscle and how that can help with our metabolic system. I'm sorry,
Metabolic.
metabolic.
Yeah, that one's,
Yes.
I've tripped up on that too.
I'm like, no, not metabolism, metabolic system, helping like inflammatory diseases, especially in women. And because I'm going to turn 40 this year and having two babies in my mid 30s, I feel like I needed to like dive into like a deeper version of what like a healthy nutrition looks like for somebody this age in this season. Cause training like I did when I was 27 isn't responding to me. And so I'm like, holy shit, this is just like how much we need to be so much aware of our body, what we're putting in, what we're smoking, how it's being grown, all the way down to like growing our own food. Because now reading this book, I am like low key scared shit of what they are putting in our food. And I'm like, that's probably why she's doing this. Do
Well,
you
that
have
is
kids?
it's a big part of it. And like a lot of people, I've definitely gotten hate, whether it be on the internet or in person or whatever it is, about hunting and trapping. And to me, it's like I would rather just be intimately part of that and part of that sacrificing of that animal if I'm going to be consuming meat. Like,
Yeah.
if you're uncomfortable with seeing, an animal that is dead but is going to be fully utilized, like 70% utilized in comparison to the market that you purchase any other meat on, they're not using 70% of that animal. They're not, respecting that animal's life. That animal wasn't allowed to live a beautiful, normal life until the moment it was, sacrificed or harvested.
Yeah.
So there's, to me, if you eat meat, you should at least be aware of what's happening up to the process of it getting to you, and just kind of turning a blind eye to it, I think, is kind of the worst thing we could do, but we're seeing it in our medicine too. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people are taking pharmaceuticals very blindly. And I'm not hating on people who take pharmaceuticals. I fully believe that there's a place for them. But like, it is a serious decision to take a medication that you're going to take for years and years and years, and it's going to change the way your body operates. And just, thinking about the things we put in our body, and thinking about other lifestyle things, and thinking of our bodies as an ecosystem and not as these isolated issues. Like, I think that's really important to kind of shift our perspective of health and wellness together, and not just like symptoms and problems that we're trying to fix.
Yeah, exactly. I believe our society is just too used to the quick fix, the red button. Like, how do we just fix this now? And it's just like, Ozempic. It's like, are you guys nuts? Okay, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but this is why I love you, because my fitness part of my like geekiness is like, oh, I could probably pick her brain and she could be like, yes, no. But that's the thing, is like, be curious, ask the questions. Like, even when you're talking about the research, like, look at the research, look what their markers were, like, look at who created that. So to that point, let's kind of switch over to that. You're the co-founder of the, is it NAP and AP, right?
So it's NAP, or the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy. And that's the word that most people don't know, is pharmacognosy. And that's actually what my degree is in. My PhD is in pharmaceutical sciences, but technically I specialize in pharmacognosy. So pharmacognosy really just means the study of natural products. But if you break it down, pharma means medicine and nosy means knowledge. So all it means is the knowledge of medicine, because way back when we just were coining the words pharmacy and pharmaceuticals and these different words, all we had was plants and fungi for medicine. So all we knew as medicine was nature. And then after pharmacognosy was our, only medicine, it evolved into the synthetics that we see now dominating the pharmaceutical market. But way back when, it was just nature that we had as medicine. So that's kind of the root of pharmaceutical sciences. And this word, like, people want to just wipe this word out of like all dictionaries because it's hard to say. And that's actually why we put it into our nonprofit name, because we're trying to like resurrect this word and bring attention to it, because it has some really cool background knowledge and history in it, and we want to emphasize that.
That's so funny. I had breakers I wrote it down and I was like, shit, I'm gonna say this right. Okay, perfect. And on here it does say you guys are focused on natural medicine. You guys are putting out educational content. I love that you are tapping on not just cannabis, but the psychedelic and the psilocybin side of things. I think that we are definitely on the verge of like the way the cannabis is going. That's kind of how it is for psilocybin, but there's also like a funk there, because I don't know, there's like the functional mushroom side that's like on the go. I'm seeing everywhere. They're like not censored at all. But then we're talking about the actual psilocybin or psychedelics that have kind of maybe stronger effects, or, things that they're being used at retreats to help people get through certain PTSDs. Any research that you've done, or have you done some yourself where you do a retreat and experience a trip?
Yeah, I've had many experiences with many different types of psychedelics, and I've had really amazing, profound experiences. I've also had some bad trips, which were just as educational for me about my own brain and my own body. But as far as the research through NAP, we've so far been part of one psychedelic study that was studying psilocybin and some other entheogens, or natural medicines that are psychotropic, but just in naturalistic settings, and seeing how the naturalistic setting, aka if you were like at home versus at a hospital. So essentially looking at like set and setting and how much that matters for different drugs. And unshockingly, it matters a lot as far as what the outcomes are, how well we can integrate those experiences, how profound those experiences seem. But that really hasn't been the focus of most of our research. But we definitely want to study more psychedelics. We also want to study other just synergies in nature, even non like psychedelic, but still important natural products. So whether that's like a nasturtium plant or ashwagandha or, salvia, or even as simple as, rolling blunts with like lavender and tobacco and cannabis, and
Yes.
like what does that mean for therapeutic benefits or potential carcinogens? Like these are things that we don't really know yet, but we want to study the synergies that people are actually using. And, things like spliffs, things like girl blunts, they're not really studied a lot. But I think more importantly, we're not studying how cannabis and psychedelics are used together. And that's what we're so passionate about studying, because both me and the other co-founder of the nonprofit, we always use them together. We've never used a psychedelic without cannabis. And there's a lot of people like that, where cannabis is just part of that experience and getting their brain into the right brain space. And it's really part of the set and setting, like having that normalcy of using cannabis and that kind of gateway into that spiritual realm. So that's something that we want to dive into a little further, is just understanding how the experience is different for people using cannabis and psychedelics versus the two isolated.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So you are looking for people who are willing to get into this research? I thought I saw a couple bit of your content that says, hey, if you're interested, go here. So we'll have to share the link for that.
Yes, there we try to we try to involve people as often as we can, because everyone wants to be part of this research. It's really cool. It's fun to be part of. So we have a couple projects open right now that people can be part of. But if you just join our email list, which if you go to our website, it'll just pop up. You'll know when we're recruiting for any study, or when you can be part of something, or just staying up to date with what we're doing.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
important to be part of that story. I think a lot of work is needed in that area, and I love that. Can you tell me what a girl blunt is? Is it the
Yeah.
one that, like, with the flower in it, like lavender, mixing it with the rose
Yeah,
petals?
exactly.
Okay.
It's just mixing other herbs and stuff, and I would even say, like, the rose blunts, like, that's considered a girl blunt to
Okay.
me,
Oh, yeah, the rose leaves, using
yeah,
the roses instead. Yeah,
yeah,
that's always fun. It's always
which
the
is
fun
funny
stuff.
though, because like, we barely know what happens to cannabis when it's combusted or lit on fire. We
Yeah.
sure as hell don't know what happens to lavender when it's lit on fire, or any of these other herbs. We don't
Myrrh.
know how the chemistry is changing, but there's some really cool research about even smoking spliffs. You get delivered about 25% more THC per puff when nicotine's present with the cannabis compared to when cannabis is alone. Like, it facilitates the THC being able to be like extracted into your lungs, essentially.
Speaking of, I got a few blunts
Yeah.
and trees,
Doesn't
and
that make you want a blunt?
yeah, definitely hits different, and yeah, I mean, I don't do it anymore for the tobacco reason, but I am seeing a lot of blunts now with, like, the hemp wraps, and those are always cool to see, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, I would have never thought that. I mean, I guess I don't know. I'm not a fan of nicotine, but I guess there may be.
I'm a fan of nicotine. I'm not a fan of the tobacco industry. Like, I'll do anything to not support them. So, like, I don't like buying. They're
There you go. That's
they're
a good
dirty. They're not good.
way.
They're not good. They're scarier than big pharma, if you ask me. But yeah, so I don't like supporting them. I actually grow my own tobacco for that exact reason. I'm growing different varieties this year to see which one's best for rolling blunts.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay,
it's just
nice.
a fun little experiment. But yeah, nicotine
That's
in
interesting
general,
'cause I
not healthy to
swear I've
smoke.
okay, yeah, I was gonna say, do you chew? I know I've chewed,
No,
and I mean, I
no.
tried. I should say I tried, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I had no idea how effed up you can get off of chewing," and I'm like, I don't know how some of these cowboys do it,
Uh,
but
dude, I
that's
tried that in high school. I have one memory of trying chew. I tried it in high school in a trailer park, and I projectile vomited after I tried it. It was the worst case of, like, the spins I've ever had in my life. I couldn't believe how sick I got.
yes.
It was terrible.
Exactly that. Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was the alcohol or which one it was. Yeah, spins. It was a terrible experience. That's all I know. That's probably why I don't drink alcohol anymore. Do you consume alcohol?
Not a lot. I mean, I have friends who own, like, breweries, and I love to support them, and I love a good craft beer, but,
Ye
talk about couch lock. If I have, like, 1 drink, I'm done. Like, I fall asleep. It's just, like, catatonic immediately. So, I don't like drinking because 'cause I'm just not as fun as if I was smoking or, doing mushrooms or something like that, which is much more uplifting for me.
Yeah, I asked because a lot of people now in the industry have kinda, like, kicked it all the way out, which is great to see. But I'm curious to know because I have dibble dabbled in some functional mushrooms and some trippy. I've had 1 or 2 trips, and you're right, absolutely. I've always been an advocate about your mindset and your environment, like, where you're at, who you're with, like, whatever is even going on in your life at that moment. Like if you're going through a lot of trauma, that like kind of expect yourself to go through some sort of maybe emotional
Yes.
release. I think my bad trip though was like I had to been like right out of high school, and that was the only time I had a bad trip. All the other trips have been like nonstop laughing.
Yeah.
But they've been to the point where like belly roll laughing, like crying. I don't even know why. I ate like raw. Then I've gotten some capsules that just made me feel really like energetic. But I don't know
Mhm.
even ever the strains because they're all like plugs, I should say. So I'm curious to know if you have some recommendations with actual names that we who love, those type of mushrooms can actually like look for, if we have plugs or people that are growing them in our area. Well, not our area here, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't have
mountains.
any, like, specific strains of mushrooms that I'm, like, passionate about. I keep it pretty simple. Like, I've grown golden teachers. That's kind of a go-to for me as far as, like, a predictable experience. That's what I'm after. I'm never after, like, the heaviest hitting macro
Yeah,
dose that I can get to get absolutely messed up. Like, I'm usually just taking a little bit to have a good time and, giggle. So, I keep it pretty simple. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that one, but, yeah,
yeah.
I keep it pretty simple.
Yeah, no, I think I've had something called Maui. It was called Maui, but again, all homegrown stuff, so hard to say, like, what I like. That's what sucks for me is, like, I'm not able to continuously get my hands on it, so it's still trying to learn, like, we'll see how this ride goes and then what was in that. But I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
consistency.
if you're interested, I'm growing them at home is quite easy now, especially there's even these bags now that you can inoculate, and you don't even
Mm,
need to transfer them, like, you just inoculate the bag, and you wait a little bit, and it starts to grow,
yeah,
you break up the mycelium a little bit, and it flushes, and you just harvest mushrooms, like, it's very, very, very user-friendly now, if you're
I love it.
interested in having that consistency. Because I will say I have a lot of friends who like the chocolates, like the mushroom chocolate,
Yes.
psilocybin chocolate,
Mhm.
and that's great that some people are having a good experience, but personally, I have not had great experiences, and I know other people who haven't because there was it's very common for it to be adulterated with other stuff, like, it's either not the right mushroom, it's, like, a fully different species, or, you just don't feel the same cleanness of that trip. And
Yeah,
there was actually data that came out, I think, last year that showed like over 50% of those chocolates had things other than psilocybin in them as far as active ingredients that shouldn't be there. A lot of them are from China. I'm not trying to diss things from China, but like if you just grow your mushrooms or if you get them in the mushroom form, at least you know that it's just mushrooms. And then you can dose yourself a lot better than a chocolate bar that you have no idea where it was made or what was put in it or what the appropriate dose is.
totally makes sense. Yeah, it's like, going back to the brownie days where people were just getting the edibles. I feel like that's kind of where we're at with
That's
this.
exactly right. Yeah, it's either you buy nugs from someone or you buy random brownies in a bag and guess the dose and you guess what strain it was and like you guess everything. So,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
especially for new users of mushrooms, get yourself a scale, weigh out your mushrooms so you can have a predictable effect, and then buy the mushrooms, like buy the actual or grow them, the mushroom. Don't buy the chocolates and don't buy things you can't see.
Yeah, that makes totally sense. Speaking of that, I actually just saw something go by through the cannabis space in regards to an announcement regarding some recall on possible mold. I don't know if you saw that. There was like 17 brands that.
I did see that actually, yeah.
Did you cover that? Can you kind of? No, I was going to say what. I mean, that's pretty scary. Again, to they're big brands, and I see them on shelves. So for
Well,
somebody
that's
that's.
kind of, I won't like bash on any brands or talk about specifics, but it's something we need to think about, especially when we talk about storage of a natural product like cannabis that has varying levels of moisture or water activity
Yes.
in it, right? Like, we don't, I don't think we store cannabis correctly, like at dispensaries. I think it should be stored, whether it's concentrates or flower, like in a temperature controlled environment where we can actually study the shelf life and we can study, at different water activities or moisture levels, like how is that mold going to grow? And we just kind of transport it at whatever temperature, store it at whatever temperature. And I think as the industry grows, we're going to start seeing more regulation there because if it was any other medicine or any other, product that was a plant, I think we would be studying that a little more, especially when you think about like med patients and how that could be, much scarier for someone like who is immunocompromised compared to
Yeah.
a healthy person who could fight off, aspergillus or some other mold or mildew.
Yes. No, and a lot of my girlfriends who have been consumers for a really long time, even me, we've been getting some really weird, I don't want to say panic attacks. They're like random spurts. I guess they are panic attacks. Like for me, I'll use myself for example. In the past year, I've been a heavy smoker all my life. I've probably been dabbing for the past 3 years, but not a daily dabber, more of a flower out of a bong, but pretty regularly. I can probably go through an eighth pretty easily through a day.
Yeah.
But lately driving, and I've smoked and drive and smoke. I get like these weird like moments where I feel like I'm having a panic attack, kind of like my blood sugar is plunging. And I can't tell if that's the case or if I'm just like totally ripped, but definitely feeling like there's been a change in how my body's receiving the smoke. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking like maybe the terps in certain strains I've been getting because I'm changing around the type of strains that I'm getting are like making me more racy than more like myself. I don't know. It's so hard to tell. I'm like, I think I need a journal now.
Well, I think there's multiple things happening here. One, I definitely think, terps are getting stronger. We having higher and higher percent terpenes in our cultivated cannabis. You'll see it 3, 4%, which is high. And if you do have a high amount of some of the terps that might make people feel anxious, like maybe it's terpinolene, maybe it's limonene, like you feel a little more anxious. But I think this conversation gets more interesting because a lot of people between 30 and 40 years old tend to experience this specifically. Like this age group
Mm,
experiences this specifically. And
mm.
I've had, dozens and dozens and dozens of people come up to me and talk about this. I think it's a change in our endocannabinoid system around this age that makes us more sensitive to THC. And I think it's partly our body and partly the strength of the weed, and the combination results in anxiety. That's
Wow.
something we wanna study, by the way. This is like a future project because we're fascinating on how your ECS changes over time, and seeing trends like this when we start to study the cannabis population of consumers and we start to ask the right questions, we start to see these really interesting trends emerge, and then that helps us guide, the next, research project and where to go with that.
Sign me up. I would love to be researched or be part of that research. Yeah,
I
I
know I
always
will.
I'm
It's gonna
it's
be
like,
interesting.
I'm gonna be 40 next year. And there's just been so many different changes in from how I need to change my nutrition, how I need to change my workouts, and how my recovery is nowadays versus even my energy levels. I could always tell like if I'm eating shitty. It just all travels into everything, like you said, that we eat, that we smoke is
Mhm.
making a change. But I feel like I've always been this way. So now I'm like, what is changing? So yeah, I think I can fit right
But
into
it
that
makes
research.
sense if we think about our endocannabinoid system, right? It is a system that's involved with every other system in our body. It's like the master regulator. And if you feel these other parts of your life changing, your ability to like metabolize or your affinity towards certain foods, you know, your ECS is absolutely involved in that. So that means something's changing with your ECS, and the way cannabis interacts with your body is through your ECS. So if that system's changing, then your reaction to cannabis would absolutely be changing. So I think it's very rational for this to be happening. I think we just don't understand what those effects are on us. And I do think things like overstimulation and anxiety and paranoia are definitely part of that.
Yeah, I had some of my girlfriends just say, "Bye, I'm not smoking anymore." I was like, "Oh my, all right, well, you gotta
And
do what's good for you," you know? I
well,
know
that
I've
kind of
seen.
sucks too, because it's like you kind of want to just keep doing it because it's part of your routine and part of your community and part of your friend group, right? But at the same
Yeah,
time, like with any medicine, the goal should really be to not always need the medicine. And I think it's also
yes.
kind of a beautiful thing. Like as we age, we just don't need the medicine as much. Like our body's saying, like, hey, like we did that for a long time. Like, let's chill for a little bit now. Like maybe
Yeah.
we need less moving forward.
Right, right. Yeah, and a lot of times some of my friends still do plugs and they're getting their stuff from people that have no testing, no labeling. And I'm like, you've got to change that up, unless you're diving in and assessing your flower like to the T, like opening up a magnifying glass and seeing what's inside. That's the point that I'm at now, just because of all the things, the more we dive into education and the more you put yourself in these rooms and these conversations, you just get to know like what are the possibilities of risk that you're taking when you're consuming products that you don't know aren't being tested, where they're coming from, how they're being stored. So there's just so much to think about, and it fits right into fitness and nutrition because it's the same thing. It's like you are what you eat. So we have to think about that all the way around.
Right, you are what you smoke too. Like, you
Yes.
are what you put into your body. So, yeah, I mean, if you're constantly smoking, like, mid-grade moldy weed, that's obviously not gonna be as good for you if you were smoking high quality, pesticide-free, organically grown, that really good, sticky, icky organic stuff. It's a fully different experience, and the value is different, and, like, the what you get out of it is fully different. The
Yeah.
experience of like a good product versus a bad product. And of course, there's financial barriers too, but we won't get into that right now.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's a perfect transition because I'm a big advocate too for the Sungrown, our NorCal farmers, obviously being with the Emerald Cup team, supporting and highlighting everything that they've done to build out where we're at now as far as a culture, community. But I feel such a difference in sun grown, like when I'm smoking sun grown herb and soil grown herb. So it's like sun grown, then soil, and then I won't dog, there's some fucking fire indoor out there, but
Yeah.
I can feel the effects in my workouts. Like I was like, holy shit, that was like not just like a very focused, I was like energetic and almost like real bubbly. I have kids, so I could always tell like when I'm extra, like reading 2 extra books or like extra piggy rides. I was like, okay, I gotta check out what terps were in that because that made me like extra, like just happy, like a really good high all the way around.
Oh, and there's we have a lot of data that sun-grown cannabis literally does produce different compounds compared to just indoor grown cannabis, a greater diversity, usually a lower percentage of each, but a greater diversity of compounds. But I think what's really important about this conversation is typically we're only testing for maybe 10 terps, not all the terps. We're not even testing for all of the compounds that add to the experience we get when we smoke something or when we vape something. We're only testing for the ones that we seek to know about, right? And there's a lot of other ones in there that contribute to the experience, but we're not quantifying. And I think that's what we feel when we smoke sun-grown. Like we're feeling these other compounds present. We're feeling these new smells present that we're not measuring, but are absolutely contributing to that experience. And yeah, I mean, the sun gives off some different energy compared to a light bulb. And it depend on your outlook on life. Like I have a very spiritually granola aspect of my life, and I'm like, yeah, the sun gives different energy, and that energy is very powerful and it's different. And I do feel like you can feel it, especially with the craft cultivators who are really putting in that love with the dry and cure, because it's like you grow it in the sun, it has all that potential, and then how do you finish it off? Because that's really like the big question. Because I've smoked some outdoor that was grown in like amazing terroir, but it's like you smoke it and so like, damn, why didn't you put the love into the end? It would have been such a good product, but so close.
It's like when it's so pretty on the outside and then light it up and you're absolutely like, what just happened here? For us, I think you're also a judge. I saw that you're a judge for a particular cup, but it gives us the opportunity to really dive into these brands, which is why I love being a judge. And especially if you're like an educator and you love giving back, being a judge is perfect because you really can, like, I'm sure you're dissecting as much as I am. I'm a pre-roll judge for Emerald Cup. So if they give me two, they're lucky because then I get to tear one up and just see what's in it.
Oh, that's a
Putting it in the
great idea.
bong, getting the fresh, it's paper can affect your taste. Paper can affect a lot of fucking things. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. If they're fatties, I am still cutting it. We got nice cutters from Raw. Shout out to Raw.
Oh, yeah.
At the tip, just enough just to see what you're putting in them, because a lot of things nowadays have the bells and whistles. It's covered in keef. It's, infused with diamonds and crumble, but then you're looking at the actual flower that's being put on there is shit. And I'm like, no, thank you. I rather have quality non-infused flower all the way around. I love infusions, but if they're going to do that, that's what sucks. So it's like judging is so much fun because we
Oh,
get to geek out on every single product and then give feedback. It's all positive criticism, I think, for the brands as well. And I think
yeah.
us as judges giving comments, not just the scorecards, because I don't know if it's the same for you guys,
Yeah,
but
we give comment. I actually love I take this very seriously too.
yes,
Like, I just I
takes
take
you
it incredibly seriously. And yeah, I actually posted on my story today just the beginning of one of the comments because I write like kind of a lot in the comments. And I can always finish a joint. Like I have a pretty high tolerance. I'm always chiefing. I can finish a joint. One of these varieties, like I'm smoking, I'm about halfway through and I'm like, I can't finish this joint. But I totally agree that I wish I had a little more flour because I have to roll mine because I call it like rollability when I'm evaluating the ability to roll it, how well it sticks together. And essentially, I always compare it to like making a sandcastle out of dry sand versus wet sand, like how it sticks when you're rolling. And so I have to roll it to evaluate, moisture, dry and cure, that kind of stuff. At least this is just for me. Everyone doesn't have to do this, but
you're
I
a
wish I
floral
had
judge.
yeah, I wish I had a little bit extra to toss in my dry herb vape so I could get a better, like, full picture of that aroma and then also smoke it and roll it. But, they're a gram. So for me, I was like, I'm just going to roll every single one into a gram joint. So at least I know if I smoke this whole thing, like, I can compare the effects from one to the other if I'm smoking the same amount. So
Ooh, I never thought about vaping it. I think
yeah, I love dry herb vaping. That's like dabbing and dry herb vaping are probably tied for my number two method. It's like joints and then either dabs or dry herb vaping.
okay,
But those are my three that I use all the time.
that'd be better for our lungs probably.
Yeah, also, like, this is no hate to anyone who smokes in their house, but I don't like to smoke, like, joints in my house. I just don't like when the
Yeah.
air is, like, particulate-y, and to each their own, but I also just love being outside, so I'll roll up, and I'm always gonna walk outside, but then at night, if I'm, like, chilling and watching Bridgerton, then I'll dry herb vape because it
Okay.
doesn't it's like I can keep vaping in the house. My dog can be next to me, and I don't feel like I'm blowing smoke in his face, but again, that's just me. Everyone else, you do you.
Yeah, no, so no bongs either. You're not a bong
No,
type?
I mean, I love my bong.
Okay,
I do
okay.
have I actually usually keep it right on my desk, here, but I'll, like, rip a bong in here, but specifically, like, full joints. I'm not trying to smoke a joint in here.
Yeah, yeah, it leaves definitely a stench. Yeah, I
Yeah, and
totally
I
agree. I have
do. I mean, I
kids, so
literally like, I say that with this ashtray literally next to me from smoking in here, but, I don't love to do it.
yeah, exactly. No, I get shit from my husband, like, "Can you?" 'Cause it's different than a bong rip or vaping. I have a electric rig. It's so different. And it just, like, lingers. to where you definitely like air purifier if you are going to be doing that. But I
Yeah, or if
figured you
the
being a
window's
scientist.
open, that's cool. You just need like a little bit of movement so it doesn't just sit in the air for like
Yes.
a long time.
Yeah, no, that's funny because I've smoked in the garage with no like opening, and I walked in and back out and I could just see it like layered like a whole
Yeah.
half of from the ceiling. I was like, "Oh shit, that really lingers." So,
Yeah.
yeah, things I got to think about sometimes, especially now that I have kids and it's not just like me and him. Um, well, no, this has been really fun. I love getting to, get to know you more on the fun side of the cannabis side, but also really diving into everything that you do for the research side of things and just helping us move forward as a community and just getting things right. And even just being helpful to us women who, we're like I said, I'm 40, I'm going through some changes in hormonal like things affecting our bodies, and all the content you put out speaks to me and I think many other women. So I really appreciate the work you do, and you always do it in a classy way. So that's always, big in my books.
No, I appreciate that. And that's something we also want to really focus our studies on in the future is understanding more about like cannabis and pregnancy and cannabis and breastfeeding and cannabis and endometriosis and menstrual pain and just like researching the things that we really should be studying, but we aren't because we don't prioritize women in research. And, we are a women funded research company. So we actually have something currently in the works. And if we can get that funding, we will be studying that sooner than later. So it's definitely a priority for us because, we know even like throughout your menstrual cycle, your tolerance to cannabis changes as your estrogen cycling. So does your tolerance and your ability or affinity towards certain products. So like
Mhm.
we should be studying this. It's clearly changes in your ECS and changes in your tolerance and your pain thresholds. So yeah.
Yeah, that's funny you say that because I felt like I runts makes me angry. Like it makes me not I'm just like so much more triggered and I'm like, did I smoke today? Why am I so different? And I'm realizing it was like always runts, any sort of runts lineage. So things that I'm
That's
starting to pay
interesting.
attention. Yeah, I'm like, did I smoke today? That's what happens when I have that strain. I'm like, okay, that did not put me in the right space. Let's try this again.
Yeah, you
But
can have a little saying like "runts makes me act like a C word unce."
exactly. I didn't want to say that, but my husband's like, totally. That's a
Yeah, I won't say it either in case it's censored because I know that word specifically is pretty bad, but, yeah, a new
That's
saying.
hilarious. That's gonna be a hashtag for one of our episodes. But this has been really fun. I'm looking forward to just like growing with you in the community and the cannabis space and the psilocybin space. But before I let you go, I do have 7 grams, which is a rapid fire. Just some questions around how you like to smoke weed and just kind of like how you enjoy
Let's
being in this.
go. Cool, I'm ready.
All right. So 7 grams, rock wool or soil?
Soil.
Good answer. Dispensary or plugs?
Oh, this is a hard one. A really good plug.
All right. I haven't heard one of those in a long time. It's because, when you have product, and most of the people that I've had lately have some sort of product. So they're OGs, but they get to the point where like, shit, I have to answer this a certain way. So,
Well,
for
I
most
also like I don't know if this is kosher to say, but there's also kind of an in between where you're buying like from a dispensary, but not from the front of a
yes,
dispensary.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah. No, I
So,
just love it. It's a fun question. It trips people up.
yeah.
Are you more of a floral terpene person, or do you lean towards gasoline terps?
Gas, 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 100% of the time.
You have a particular strain or genetic line that you seem to be attracted to?
I
Or
mean,
you
I'm a sucker
prefer,
for
right?
nectar. Like, I
Oh,
love terpinolene. I love, like I always say I love the strains that give people panic attacks. Like, those are those are the ones that, like, make me feel normal. So, that's what I go towards, but I'm always giving the warning, like, just because I like this does not mean
yes.
that you are going to like this.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm in the same field. I will say there are some, like, really bomb floral, um, terpenes or some strains out there that have the floral terps in it, like whitethorn rose?
Linalool. Yeah, linalool, the terp, like, I love strains that have linalool, and it kind of is a little sneaky. Like, I found
Yes.
that linalool, you don't always smell it, like, when you're smelling a bag or a nug, you don't always smell it right off the bat, but once you start to grind it and you start to crush up the nug and really release those flavors, then it comes out a lot stronger. So, I'm very interested in linalool for that reason, and I like
Hmm.
the smell once it's ground.
Yeah, I gotta pay more attention to it. But like osmine too, we don't get that often, and that is definitely a good vibe, a good feeling for me, at least.
Great vibe, and osmium and terpinolene are usually found together, like, they're terps, like, osmium and terpinolene are found together kinda like, limonene and caryophyllene are often found together. They're kinda like these pairs that, exist in cannabis.
Hmm, I wonder if they know that. It's like a good blend for those who make rosin, especially because like
Yeah.
certain rosins press so much. So fun. Well, we kind of probably know this. Bong tokes or joints?
Yeah, J's all day, like, always number 1.
Papers or leaves?
Papers. I use the raw ethereal now. I used to use raw black, but, like, those are my favorite papers for
I like
sure. They're
raw.
yeah, I love raw.
Okay, now we're gonna go into concentrate world. Are you leaning on resins or rosin?
Rosin for sure.
Any particular favorite, like, presses right now or strains on rosin? It's so hard to find. I mean, I think because of the plant only being, the genetics of it only being able to produce so much for certain brands that you're seeing, like, a lot of brands collaborate with the same. It's just depending on how they're curing it and how they're pressing it.
Yeah, and I have nothing in particular right now, like, worth talking about, but in general, like, I'm much more familiar with varieties of flower than concentrates just 'cause
Yeah.
accessibility-wise, like, flower is all over the place here, but rosins and resins, like, you kinda have to seek a little more, so I have less of a diversity at home of extracts compared to flower.
You should probably make your own. You probably could do it to a very good point being a
Yeah, no, I
scientist.
am this year, and I have in the past, but,
Oh, that's gonna be great content. That's gonna be
yeah,
so fun.
well, that one's a little hard because I live in a state that's, med only and no home grow, so I do have, like, a Patreon through my podcast that I show things on, but I have to be a little careful,
Yeah.
with where I live and, like, how loud I am.
I forget about that living in California. Reminder, Californians, we are a little bit more privileged here.
A little bit, a lot of it, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know, but hey, you guys will get there, and I think, we were a great model to be like, "Don't do this and do that," or vice versa, hopefully. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, everyone's figuring it out, but, I mean, I still do what I want here, I just can't be loud about it, so I can't complain that much,
Right.
but
Yeah, keep it cool with the neighbors.
exactly. I do have cool neighbors.
That's the important part. All right, last one, Cheech and Chong or half-baked?
Cheech and Chong.
All right. Everybody loves Cheech and Chong. They have like a new museum out here in LA. So it's just they're always going to be part of the culture. And I think they're, a huge staple for a lot of people. Half Bake, I have to say, it's always been something I loved personally growing up. I'm a huge Dave Chappelle fan. So it's always curious to see where people land with
No,
that.
I love Dave Chappelle too, but I'm gonna be honest, it's really just because they follow me on TikTok and Instagram, Cheech and Chong, so, like, I feel
Nice.
cool. So, I'm just gonna say them.
All right, that works for me. Well, thank you so much, Riley. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your information, your education, you just basically everything that you have shared with us as far as your story and who you are in the space. We, are here to support you. Anything you've got going on, please let us know. We are here to let everybody know the good people in our space, and make sure you guys take a moment to look at our description, follow her. She'll be on Instagram. We'll put all the links to where you can follow her and check out anything she's got going on as far as her researches. Any last words before we go? And actually, before we go, can you just go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you? And then we will wrap it up from here.
Yeah, for sure. So, I make content on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube under the name Cannabichem, Cannabichem. And then I also have my podcast called Bioactive, which you can find on all streaming platforms, and we talk about the chemistry and pharmacology of cannabis and other natural products. Oh,
All
and a
right.
nonprofit. Yeah, I think you'll put the link below, but it's appliedpharmacognosy.org.
Yes, I'll definitely put that link below, and I will make sure that everybody gets in there. And if you guys, fit for any of that, please make sure you guys put yourself out there, because that's the only way we're going to grow. So again, Riley, I really appreciate you taking the time today. If there's anything you need from us, let us know. In the meantime, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Till the next one. Peace.
Peace. Thanks for having me on, Casey.